This is Mr. Oscar, and today we will talk about the single most underrated execution tool I have ever come across in all my years of studying why people follow through and why they don't. Not a morning routine, not a productivity app, not a vision board or a motivational playlist or a new definition of your why. A simple psychological structure. Two parts, an if and a then. That's it. And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds almost insultingly simple for a problem that has derailed careers, broken discipline streaks, collapsed businesses, and left genuinely capable people wondering for years why they cannot seem to close the gap between what they intend to do and what they actually do. But stay with me, because what a psychologist named Peter Gollwitzer discovered about this structure, backed by over 30 years of research and more than 100 independent studies, is one of those things that once you understand it properly, you cannot unsee it. You start noticing the exact moments in your day where the gap opens up. And for the first time, you have something waiting on the other side of that gap instead of just hoping willpower shows up. I wish someone had shown me this in my 30s, I genuinely do. Because the version of me who lost a business, lost his rhythm, lost years to preparation without execution, that man did not have a motivation problem. He did not have a discipline problem. He had a planning problem of a very specific kind. And Gollwitzer's research names that problem exactly. Let me take you back to something I have never fully described on this channel before. There was a period after my business collapsed, somewhere in the middle of 2012, where I had made a very clear decision about what I needed to do to start rebuilding. I had done the reflection, I had done the journaling, I had spoken to people I trusted, I had mapped out the steps, I was not confused about the direction. I knew exactly what the next move was, and yet every single day, I would wake up with the intention to make that move, and by mid-morning something would have redirected me. A phone call, an unexpected problem, a moment of low energy that made me tell myself I'd wait until the afternoon. Afternoon would come and the same thing would happen. By evening, I would sit down and make the same plan for tomorrow that I had made the day before. This went on for months. And the maddening part was that I was not lazy during those months. I was working constantly. I was busy from morning to night, but I was not doing the specific thing, the one thing, that actually needed to happen. I kept getting pulled off course at the exact moment the important work was supposed to begin. At the time, I told myself it was a discipline issue. I told myself I needed more willpower. I told myself I needed to want it more badly. All the stories we tell ourselves when we don't have the real explanation. There was a man I was working with briefly during that period, an older consultant named Jeffrey, who watched this pattern play out over several weeks. One afternoon, he sat across from me and said something I initially dismissed as too simple to be useful. He said, "Oscar, you have a plan. What you don't have is a pre-written response for the moment the plan meets resistance. And until you have that, the resistance will win every time." I didn't know what he meant. Not fully, not then. But that conversation came back to me years later when I found Peter Gollwitzer's work. And when I understood what Gollwitzer had actually proven, I finally understood what Jeffrey had been pointing at. Peter Gollwitzer is a psychologist at New York University. He has dedicated the better part of 4 decades to studying one of psychology's most persistent puzzles, the intention-action gap. The intention-action gap is exactly what it sounds like. It is the distance between what you plan to do and what you actually do. And Gollwitzer's research shows that this gap is not a character flaw. It is not a motivation deficit. It is a structural problem in how most people form their intentions. Most people, when they set a goal or make a plan, form what Gollwitzer calls a goal intention. A goal intention sounds like, I intend to work on the proposal today. I intend to go to the gym this week. I intend to have that difficult conversation with my manager. And goal intentions are not useless. But Gollwitzer's research shows they are profoundly vulnerable to one thing, the moment of friction, because real life does not deliver your intended behavior in a clean, distraction-free environment. Real life delivers interruptions. It delivers low energy. It delivers unexpected urgency that feels more pressing than the thing you planned. It delivers the 1,000 small moments of resistance that stand between your morning intention and your evening execution. And a goal intention, I intend to do this, has no answer prepared for any of those moments. So when friction appears, the brain defaults to what is easier, what is more familiar, what requires less deliberate effort. This is where Gollwitzer's most important discovery comes in. Through a series of studies that have now been replicated across more than 110 independent experiments, involving everything from cancer patients completing treatment, to students finishing academic assignments, to professionals executing complex work tasks, Gollwitzer found that there is a specific type of intention that dramatically outperforms a standard goal intention. He called it an implementation intention, and its structure is disarmingly simple. If situation X arises, then I will perform behavior Y. That is it. If, then. A pre-written response embedded into your planning before you ever meet the moment of friction. In his studies, people who formed implementation intentions were between 2 and 3 times more likely to follow through on their intended behavior than people who had the same goal but only formed a goal intention. 2 to 3 times, not a marginal improvement, a structural leap in execution rate. And the reason it works is rooted in how the brain actually operates under pressure and distraction. When you form an implementation intention, when you write or say out loud, if it is 7 a.m. and I sit down at my desk, then I will open the proposal and work on it for 45 minutes before I check anything else. You are doing something very specific inside your brain. You are creating what Gollwitzer calls a mental link between a situational cue and a planned response. You are essentially preloading the behavior into the part of your brain that handles automatic responses. So when 7 a.m. arrives and you sit at your desk, the brain does not have to make a fresh decision. The decision has already been made. The cue triggers the response almost automatically. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for deliberate decision-making and which is highly vulnerable to fatigue, depletion, and distraction, is largely bypassed. The behavior fires from a deeper, more automatic level of processing. Wendy Wood, the behavioral psychologist at the University of Southern California, whose research I have referenced before on this channel, calls this process habit-like automaticity. She found in her work that the brain conserves enormous cognitive energy when behaviors are linked to specific cues, rather than requiring a fresh decision each time. Gollwitzer's implementation intentions essentially create that cue-response link before the habit has had time to form naturally. In other words, you are engineering the automatic response instead of waiting years for it to develop on its own. There is also important research here from Roy Baumeister, the psychologist at Florida State University who conducted landmark studies on what he called ego depletion, the finding that willpower is a finite cognitive resource that depletes with use throughout the day. Baumeister's research showed that every decision you make, every moment of self-regulation, every instance of resisting distraction draws from the same limited mental reserve. By the time afternoon arrives, that reserve is significantly lower than it was at 8 a.m., and that is precisely when most people's execution falls apart. Gollwitzer's implementation intentions work in direct response to this problem, because when the behavior is pre-decided and cue-triggered, it does not draw from the willpower reserve in the same way. You are not making a decision in the moment of friction. The decision has already been made. The friction meets a prepared response instead of an exhausted deliberation. This is what Jeffrey was pointing at all those years ago when he said I had no pre-written response for the moment the plan met resistance. He was right, and it cost me years. There is one more layer of this research that I want to make sure you understand before we get to the practical piece, because it is the layer that most people never hear about when they encounter Gollwitzer's work. Implementation intentions are not only powerful for triggering behavior, they are equally powerful for suppressing the specific distractions and impulses that pull you off course. Gollwitzer demonstrated this in a separate series of studies where participants who formed if-then plans around their distractions. If I feel the urge to check my phone during focused work time, then I will place the phone face down and return to the task, showed dramatically greater ability to maintain focus and resist the disruptive impulse than those who simply intended to stay focused. This means the structure works in both directions. You can use it to activate the behavior you want, and you can use it to suppress the behavior you don't want. Pre-written responses on both sides of the equation. This is not motivation. This is architecture. So here is the practical structure I want you to build this week. One complete if-then system. Not 10. Not a whole new planning process. One system built properly. Start by identifying the one behavior that, if you executed it consistently, would have the greatest impact on your life right now. You should know what this is. Most of us do. It is usually the thing we have been planning to start for the longest time. Now build 3 implementation intentions around it. 3. Written down, not held in your head. The first intention is your activation intention. This is the if-then that fires the behavior. It looks like this. If it is this specific time and I am in this specific place, then I will immediately begin this specific action. Not a vague version, a precise one. Gollwitzer's research is very clear that the more specific the situational cue, the stronger the mental link and the more reliably the behavior fires. The second intention is your obstacle intention. This is the if-then that protects the behavior when friction appears. Think about the most common thing that pulls you off course. The interruption, the low energy moment, the sudden sense that now is not the right time. Write it down. Then write your prepared response. If this specific obstacle appears, then I will do this specific thing and return to the task. You are not hoping to handle the obstacle in the moment. You are preloading the answer before the moment arrives. The third intention is your recovery intention, because even with the best architecture, there will be days when the behavior doesn't fire, when life overrides the system. Gollwitzer's research on what he calls self-regulatory failure shows that the biggest execution killer is not the missed day itself. It is the absence of a planned response to the missed day. Most people miss once, have no plan for recovery, and the break in the chain becomes the end of the chain. Your recovery intention sounds like, if I miss the behavior today, then I will execute a reduced version of it before the day ends, or I will return to the full version tomorrow at the same time without self-criticism or renegotiation. That last part matters, without self-criticism or renegotiation. Because the moment you start renegotiating the terms of your commitment after a miss, you are no longer operating the system. You are dismantling it. Write all three, review them the night before, place them somewhere visible. Let the cues do what Gollwitzer's 30 years of research shows they do. Trigger the response before willpower even has to show up. I want to close with something that has stayed with me since I first understood this research properly. For most of my life, I believed that the people who executed consistently were people who simply wanted it more than I did, that they had reserves of discipline I didn't have. That consistency was a character trait distributed unevenly at birth, and I had received a smaller share. Peter Gollwitzer's work dismantled that belief completely. Because what his research shows, across 30 years and more than 100 studies, is that the gap between intention and action is not a measure of desire. It is not a measure of character. It is a planning problem with a structural solution. The people who follow through are not stronger than you. They are not more committed than you. They have simply, consciously or unconsciously, built the pre-written response that meets the moment of friction before the moment of friction arrives. You can build that today with a piece of paper and 3 sentences. If, then. That is the architecture of execution. Everything else is just waiting for the motivation that was never coming. I'm Mr. Oscar, this is Execution Psychology, and I will see you in the next one.